Well, hello and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. The Italian photographer Gianni Berengo Gardin left behind an archive of more than 2 million stills, constituting one large portrait of Italy's post-war era. "I'm not an artist," he used to say. "I'm just a witness of what I see." Man Ray made portraits. Did you know that? Not just of Lee Miller. It makes sense if you consider the access he had to the worlds of art, fashion, music and literature. Man Ray was perfectly placed to make defining images of his contemporaries, from the avant-garde studies of Jean Cocteau, Peggy Guggenheim and Gertrude Stein, amongst many others, as well as intimate images of Man Ray's friends and lovers. If you don't know the work, I highly recommend that you search it out. The best and I think biggest book of this work is Man Ray Portraits, published by Shmerma Moselle, which is curated from the Man Ray archives of the Centre Pompidou, Paris, and contains 500 portrait images. It was the Pompidou who, in the mid-1990s, bought 12,304 negatives from Man Ray's estate, 2/3 of which were portraits. His earliest portraits date from 1921, but he continued making them up to 1968, when he photographed the actress Catherine Deneuve for the cover of the Sunday Times magazine. In 1922, he established his first studio in Paris, and the portraits began in earnest. Amongst these portraits are many of artists: Braque, Matisse and Picasso, Duchamp, Brancusi, Miro, Cocteau, Art, Balthus, Calder, Dali, de Chirico, Delaunay, Duchamp, Dufay, Ernst, Aluard and Giacometti, amongst many others. All of his portraits feel contemporary even today: sharp, minimal, simple and powerful. Man Ray is not just about rayogams and solarization, that's for sure. I've always thought that it makes a lot of sense for photographers to photograph artists, and it seems to be something I don't see a lot of these days, and I think that's a shame. Surely artists are available to photographers. They work in interesting spaces, they're interesting people. Maybe more of that work should be done. Well, if you're looking for inspiration and some great bodies of work, I'm going to recommend a few photographers to you to check out. The first one is Gauthier de Blonde, who actually has contributed to the podcast quite a while ago now with his What Does Photography Mean to Him? And he very much photographed the YBAs, the young British artists coming out of Britain in the 1990s, now looked back upon, of course, as an incredible historical artifact. Well, you can get a book of his work, which was published by the Tate, and that is called Artists. The next photographer I'm going to mention to you is George Lewinsky. Now, his book on artists, which I think was produced by the Royal Academy, you can pick up quite cheaply nowadays. But for me, he is the consummate portrait photographer, always looking for new ways of doing things and interpreting the image. So look out for George Lewinsky, and that's George, George. I'm sure a lot of you listening may even have been taught by George, because he was a very long-term lecturer at the Old London College of Printing. In fact, so far back that he even taught alongside Bill Jay in the late 1960s. The third I'm going to give you as a suggestion to check out is Alexander Lieberman. Now, a lot of you may not know Lieberman as a photographer. You may know him as the iconic art director of American Vogue. There were two great art directors, really, of that 50s, 60s, 70s period in New York, in magazines: Alexander Lieberman and, of course, Alexander Brodovich. And I think that what's interesting about both of them is they created really interesting photography. Well, it makes anybody interesting to me. But Lieberman really focused on artists in their studios, and there is also a book available of that work. For some reason, it's got really expensive recently, but there you go. 3 photographers that might inspire you and inspire your work around photographing artists. There's no doubt that we are in the golden period and have been in the golden period of documentaries for a long time now. I suppose really since the ability for digital filmmaking and Netflix as outputs and platforms have kind of developed and made the documentary photographer so much easier and affordable to make. Well, I saw two recently. I think one you could very clearly describe as a documentary, and perhaps very loosely so, but in its essence, I think, is a documentary. One of which I thought actually didn't really work very well for me for a number of reasons, and one which I think is perhaps the most powerful piece of filmmaking. Have I ever seen any better? I don't know. I don't think so. It affected me so much. Okay, what are they? I hear you cry. Well, I'll stick with the first one. I'll start with the first one that I felt didn't work, and then we'll move on to the second. It was called I Am Martin Parr. And a lot of you may have seen it. It was broadcast on the BBC recently, and I think it also had a limited cinema distribution. It's, of course, about the photographer Martin Parr, who I find to be a little bit of an enigma. I find Martin very interesting. I know him. I've spoken to him. We've had conversations. But I don't really know him at all. And I've never seen anything which has given me any insight into who he really is. I've seen lots of photographs and lots of facts and figures and interviews with him and all that kind of stuff. But I still don't feel I know him. So I sat down to watch I Am Martin Parr with a hope that it would give me that insight. It's made by Dogworth, who are a fantastic documentary company with an incredible pedigree. So for me, whenever I see Dogworth, I think, well, it's worth seeing. It was part of the Arena strand on BBC, which again, for me, is an absolute stamp of quality. The problem was that it just felt, again, this is personal, it felt a bit utterly lazy. Not just a bit, but lazy. And kind of lacked an understanding of Martin or his work or the type of audience who would be watching this film, and therefore the quality of insight that was required. And it fell into that kind of situation around some talking heads who, to me, felt slightly abstract. I didn't get why they had been chosen. They didn't give me, as somebody interested in Martin and photography, the insight I was looking for. Some of them I didn't recognise at all, even though their names came out. Evidently, one of them is a bass player, I think, in the band Madness. So that was really kind of disappointing for me, because the elements of the film that did work were the archival footage, which was interesting, and the little bits and pieces with Martin, although he never really gives over very much. So for me, an opportunity missed. It fell into the trap of a format. And in following that format, I should say, I think it lost sight of who its audience was. Now, a film that definitely understands its audience is Mother Vera by the photographer Alice Tomlinson. Now, Alice appeared on the podcast many, many years ago, actually right at the very beginning, when the book that she met Vera through, really, this body of work, was first published. And I think it was an absolutely pivotal piece of work. It's called Ex Voto, AT 2019. At the time, I felt it was perhaps one of the most important photo books that I'd ever seen and would be of that time. I'm not sure if you can buy it anymore. I have seen it for sale at extortionately large prices. Well, Alice followed up the book by making a film and following the life of Vera, who is a nun and I think probably a Mother Superior now of a convent. I'm not going to tell you very much more than that, other than to encourage you to see it if you see that it's on anywhere. And I presume at some point it might get streaming. It has been getting 5-star reviews. It's all in black and white. It's all in Polish with subtitles. It is perhaps the slowest and darkest film, and I mean darkest as in lack of light, that I've ever seen. It tells the story of Vera in the way in which I believe a highly sophisticated visual storyteller, which is what Alice is, would tell a story. So that's Mother Vera. I highly, highly recommend it. As I said, I'm not sure where you're going to be able to see it, but look out for it, and perhaps also follow Alice. Look at her work. Mother Vera isn't her only body of work. She's had a number of books out over the last couple of years. She's based in London, and I really think that she's perhaps one of the most important photographers that we have working today. So why wouldn't you check her out? Where you will be able definitely to hear from Alice as well as two other people is in an event which I'm doing at the end of October, Sunday the 26th of October to be accurate. And that is a Photographic Life Live 2025. The idea is very simple. It's a day of 3 talks, 3 podcast recordings, which I will be doing at the Oxford Brookes University campus in Oxford in the UK, in the Headington Hill campus to be accurate. It's all day, as I say, on Sunday the 26th of October. Attendance is completely free. I'm not going to charge you anything, but it would be lovely to see you there, to meet you, listeners. We've been going for a long time now, and I just thought it was a great time to do something in person. The people I will be talking to will be Chris Floyd, a great portrait photographer. Again, check Chris out, and we'll be talking about communication through portraiture. Alice Tomlinson will be joining me, and we'll be talking about the journey through a project, obviously with specific reference to Mother Vera that I was just discussing. And finally, Michael Pritchard from the Royal Photographic Society. I'm sure many of you will be aware of Michael. And we will be talking about the archive, the photographic archive, which both of us feel is perhaps one of the most important subjects that any photographer should be dealing with, talking about at the moment. And I think also that most people are having a big problem with. So Sunday the 26th of October, if you go to unitednationsofphotography.com, you will find a post there all about the day, giving full information. There's parking, there's food available. It's a fantastic brand new digital theatre space that it will be held in. You will have to register through Eventbrite, and we have a maximum, I think, of 60 to 70 seats. So I know that we've already announced this, and seats are going fast. So do please make sure you register and that you get your seat confirmed. I think it's going to be fun. I got into a rather heated, actually unfortunately heated discussion recently on Threads with one of my ex-students, one of my graduates. And it was about printing of photography, because I put out a post saying that photographers have to understand printing, commercial printing, litho printing, if they have any expectation that when their work is printed, and where I'm meaning printed, I'm saying in a magazine, perhaps in a book, in a leaflet, anything on paper that isn't a straightforward photographic print, they really need to understand how LIFO works and the expectation that you should have from it based on the image you supply. And I was talking specifically about photographers still working with analog, then getting their analog film scanned and submitting a scan, and how I could tell by looking at commercial printing today which was an analog image that had been scanned and which was a straightforward digital image. A number of people said there's absolutely no way, and I'm talking rubbish. Well, I can tell you I can. And the reason for that is by working with analog and then introducing a scan, you're introducing another step away from the original capture, another element in the process. But also because commercial printing today is set up for a generic digital image. In the past, commercial printers would do their own drum scanning, and therefore they would thumbprint the image, the scan, to the specific printing press that the printing was going to take place on. Whereas now, because they're submitted scans from a whole range of different places, they choose a generic, and that generic rarely works with an analog film that's then been scanned. Now, again, you may disagree with me, you may think I don't know what I'm talking about. I would be more than happy to sit down with anybody and point at a magazine and tell you which ones had gone through this process. Anyway, unfortunately, my graduate student completely missed the point and understood litho as being litho printing. And however many times I sort of tried to explain what litho printing was, they weren't having it and claimed that I was an old man stuck in the past and what have you. Well, maybe I am. I've certainly been in the past, but I'm now very much in the future. And as we all know, the present and the future are very much informed by the past. Anyway, what I would say is if you are a photographer who is going to see their work printed on paper, therefore not backlit, but front lit. So whereas, of course, on your screen it's backlit, on a piece of paper it's front lit, it's a very, very different experience. And a lot of the Photoshop processes that you may put your images through, pumping up reds and blues and so forth, to make it look great on a screen, may actually be unprintable through a CMYK process. Now, that's about as technical as I want to get on this podcast, because we're not a technical podcast. But it is really important that as a photographer, you understand that, because it will inform the scans that you supply, but it will also inform your expectation of the finished printed article. And so often I hear photographers saying how disappointed they are by a printed artifact, not a photographic print, not a digital print, a single print or a darkroom print, but a multiple print that may have been printed on sheets of 4, 8, 24 or 32 up, or even 64. And if you want to know what that means, you're going to have to Google it. So, photographers, please, if you're going to get your work printed in a magazine, spend a little bit of time understanding commercial litho printing. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode, a little mixed bag of stuff. I also hope that you think it sounded a little bit better. I've improved, I hope, the audio quality with some investment in audio equipment. I finally got set up as a proper home studio, I suppose, with all the things you need and professional interfaces and what have you. It's only taken me, I don't know how many years to get there. But anyway, I hope it all sounds good. I also have to thank you for all of the kind words that were sent to me about my conversation last week with Jim Mortram. I do think that it was perhaps the best episode or conversation that we've had. Very little to do with photography, I think everything to do with life. And that's certainly something which is challenging all of us at the moment. So many people I know, so many friends of mine are having a difficult time. And obviously, I wish them all the very best. And I hope that you can all take care.